Hello, my name's Jamie Ward. This is a short film on cramping up and gluing a frame. In previous films we've gone through the mortising of stiles and tenon of the rails. So for this operation we've obviously got our frame. The tools we'll need: a pair of sash cramps. I tend to prefer the Record 135 sash cramps. I find these useful because we can clamp these together and create longer sash cramps if we need to. So you take the heads off, bolt them together there. We tend to use the plastic binders on the sash cramps to stop a reaction of the glue on the timber. So we place those onto the sash cramp. We've got some U-blocks, so we've made these to fit over the tenons so we can cramp and not damage our work. We've got some winding sticks to check that the frame is not in twist or wind. We've got a method for checking the frame is square, either with a ruler across the diagonal or pinch rods which place in between and check the diagonals. We will have a mechanism for gluing, so glue brushes. It's always worth picking up a set of brushes if you go to a car boot sale or a market, £1 or £2 for a bunch of half a dozen. Glue pot, a lollipop stick so we can mix the glue. Always useful keeping hold of those, or even the little coffee sticks, stirring sticks. We're going to use urea formaldehyde, the adhesive. We've got a brush and a rag to clear off the extra glue. So first thing we will do is to do a dry cramp. It's always important that you go through this process because you want to check to make sure that everything is fine, the frame is square, you understand how long it takes to get the frame together. You might need an additional pair of hands if it's a bigger operation, bigger frame that you're cramping, gluing up. So place the frame onto the sash cramps. You notice it's on these bearers. That's just to make sure that the frame is sitting flat. So we tend to have a gluing area. So we've got this table away from our main bench area, which is close to the sink. Hot water, cold water, rags, etc. So we're out of the cabinet workshop. We're in a separate area so we can glue up and be left alone and have everything to hand to glue up. So I've tightened up the cramps. What I'm going to do now is just check for twist or wind. So these winding sticks, you can see there's a red and a white line painted across the edge. I'm going to place these onto the rails and then I'm going to sight the frame. So I'm going to look from one side to the other and just making sure that the frame is not in twist or wind, so it's not doing that. And as I look at it, it's fine. If it was higher in one corner, that might mean undoing and pushing down on that corner. So if this is high, push down on that corner. If this is high, push down on that corner. So I'm happy the frame is not in twist. I'm then going to check the diagonals to make sure the frame is square. So I can just about get that ruler in there. So I could use the ruler maybe, or I could use pinch rods where we place that up against the diagonals, check that length, turn around and check that length, and they're exactly the same. If the frame was longer in one way, so we're assuming that the rails are the same length, in this case they are. So for example, if that direction was longer than this direction, we tend to place the ruler onto the frame and then move your sash cramps in that way. So in other words, if that's longer, you can just tweak the sash cramp a touch in that direction, so in the direction that it's longest, and then check again. And what that will do then is bring this frame square. So I'm happy the frame, say it's checked, it's not in twist or wind, and it's square. The next process would be to take the frame apart and then mix up some glue. So looking at adhesives, in our workshop we tend to have two adhesives that we're working with: urea formaldehyde and PVA. Some people call that white glue. The advantage of the PVA is that it's already mixed. It's cheaper than the urea formaldehyde. The advantage of the urea formaldehyde, it tends to have gap filling properties compared to this version of PVA which doesn't. This one is external for external use. This particular PVA is for internal use. There are PVAs on the market which have gap-filling properties and for external use. So for this operation, we're going to be using urea formaldehyde. We sometimes decant this into smaller containers because another disadvantage of this is that if you keep on opening the lid and taking adhesive out, it can reduce the shelf life. So terminology, shelf life, how long it lasts in the tub. Pot life, how long you've got to work with the glue. Open time will be how long you've got with the adhesive on the components before it goes off. So urea formaldehyde, we're going to mix probably 2 heaped teaspoons. Put the lid back on. We've got our lollipop stick, and then over to the sink. We're going to mix it with cold water. So we tend to get the water running in a stream, and we're looking to mix this into a paste. So water goes a long way. I would suggest you probably don't want to put more than 20% of water in there, but ideally a small amount of water, mix, small amount of water, mix, don't make it too runny. Depending on the temperature, so time of year, might dictate how runny you make this. So if it's quite warm, it's the summer months, then you might make this a little bit runny compared to the winter months. Okay, so over to the frame. Different schools of thoughts on applying the adhesive. Some people just put it onto the cheeks and the tenons. Some people put it onto the mortises, inside the mortises as well, so they apply it to both surfaces. So depending on who you refer to, dictates where you're going to put the adhesive. I tend to put a bit on onto the tenon, small amount onto the cheek. Try not to get too messy with this. As I say, if you've got a big gluing up job, then you might want to get assistance with this, help with gluing up. You spent all this time and effort to get to this stage, you don't want it to go wrong. Other considerations would be, as I've done, is to lock the workshop door so no one comes in and disturbs you, and to do it when you're fresh, early in the morning, not last thing at night, when you're tired and you can make mistakes. So I'm placing some glue inside the mortise. And onto the sides where the tenon will come in. Some people suggest, so coming back to your face side marks, what some people suggest is that you don't leave this lying around with the adhesive going off. So in other words, to put the components together as quickly as possible, so the air isn't making the glue go off too quickly. Get the components together as quickly as possible, so not to leave them lying around. So I'm just going to put a bit of glue into the mortises on the stile. Bring that around, checking the face side, face edge marks. So the bench marks are telling me how this comes together. Onto the sash cramps, gluing up blocks. So with the gluing up blocks, there are different types you can make. We have these ones that sit over the end of the tenons. You can have some that sit up against the side, so if you're cramping maybe boards together. You can even make some maybe that slide over the end of the sash cramp like these. So frames together, we've got a bit of squeeze out there, so I'm just going to just wipe that excess off quickly there. Back to our checking process. So the winding sticks onto the sash cramps, onto the rails, looking from side to side, and this time I can see the left-hand corner is slightly high, so I'm just going to push that down. Come back, checking from side to side, and that is parallel, not in twist. And then the next process is to check that the frame is square. So with the pinch rods, turn it around, and the frame is square. So the last thing we do before we walk away is to make sure we clear all the glue off. So I tend to get an old toothbrush, my daughter's old toothbrush, get a yogurt pot, and some hot water. Now, different schools of thought on this. Some people like to wait for the glue to go off, so they see the bead of additional glue that comes out of the joint, and they wait for that to go tacky, and maybe take it off then. Some people leave it on, but you have to be careful that if there's too much squeeze out, the molecules adhere together and it can become quite difficult to get the glue off. I tend to use an old toothbrush, some hot water, and just brush the additional adhesive off. What you have to be careful of is not rubbing this into the surface of the pores, the grain, because it will show up when you come to finish your work. And also remember, if you do one side, make sure you do the other, so turn the frame over. So just checking, and then putting the frame back round again. Just going to double check that the frame is still not in twist. That's fine. And then I would tend to leave that sort of 2 to 3 hours, ideally sort of as long as possible. Carry on with the next job. Just remember to wash your brush. We tend to use hot water to clear the brush, to clean the brush. The glue. So we tend to leave the stick into the glue. So for health and safety reasons, we don't tend to pour that down the sink because it could block the sink up. So if we leave the stick in there, overnight it goes off, and then you can pull out the waste, throw that away, and reuse the yogurt or the pot. And the last thing, just to point out with the wall cabinets here, the reason why we're going through that process of making sure the frame's not in twist or wind, if we're making a piece like this, if the door is in twist or wind, if it's twisted, it makes it very difficult to shoot it into the door, into the carcass. So it's very important to get the frame nice and flat and not in twist and wind.